Hey everyone, my name is Daniel, an indie game dev living in Germany. I'm currently working on a shoot-'em-up roguelite game called Osore for some time now. I've got the base areas all set up so far and many of the major systems are done. So for the past weeks I just felt like adding some minor systems, changing some minor things and adding a tiny bit more content. So something that I wanted to add to the game since almost the beginning is a progression bar on the game over page. It's just because I really like how frustrated you are in, for example, Cuphead, when you see that you died shortly before the end of a level. And I mean, isn't frustration everything we want when playing roguelikes or hard games in general? Anyway, I put this progression bar at the top, gave it a nice introduction animation and slapped some nice logic on this. To let the progress bar display which level you died in, I gave every gameplay scene, so the normal levels and boss fights, a progression index. Then the progress bar checks the progression index I set for the current scene and find the position on the progress bar with the same progression index as the scene. Lastly, I then placed the player mark at the position with the progression index of the scene the player died in. After I created the progression bar, I jumped onto another new mechanic, which is called the starter spell selection. This starter spell selection appears at the start of every level in every of the 4 different areas. I didn't got it working right away, probably because I just used a more complicated and way too smart way for me, but on the second try I did it another way and it works really good. But let's have a look at what it really is. So the starter spell selection are 3 slots with randomly chosen spells, and you can pick up one of these 3 to start the new level with. When you picked up one, the other 2 spells will disappear and the camera begins scrolling. I actually really like it and it's definitely a nice addition to Osore. After I finished adding these 2 systems to the game, I did a less exciting task, and this is adding more sound effects. I got much of them implemented, but there's still a good amount of work on the sound design for my game left. I made a nice system some time ago, and with it I can easily call sound effects using only a single line of code, which is pretty fast. And in the long run, it saves a good amount of time for me than doing it the classical way. But actually it's not very interesting for you, so let's skip this in this devlog. Then I want to say a huge thank you to Synthwave Dave, because he gave me really good feedback on one of the bosses called Aragos. And I need to be honest here, I rushed its second stage and I thought no one would really care. Synthwave Dave proved me wrong and I'm actually thankful for it. By the way, another thank you to all the other people that give me feedback for the creation of Osore. I really appreciate your support. But back to the new second stage for my boss Aragos. After a tiny bit of brainstorming, I came up with these 2 spiders that appear on the second stage. From this point on, they walk on each their wall. While moving around, they also shoot out some sine wave movement bullets that can hurt the player, of course. These 2 creatures sitting on the walls really help using all the space in the boss fight arena, and they keep the player moving even more in this fight as well. And while we are talking about bosses, let me present to you Howler. This sticky-like creature spawns constantly little howlers, and after some time these fall down to the bottom and explode into a little burst of projectiles. The boss fight is mainly based around this mechanic, but I made another attack to make the fight interesting. It's actually nothing more than this really cool bullet pattern. For the second stage I just speeded everything up so the little howlers spawn faster and they move faster as well. After adding sounds and doing some final polishing, I finished making this boss. But hey, we don't stop now. I created another boss called the Dreamer of Doom. It's set in the 3rd area this time and it looks a bit similar to Howler, but it's totally different in gameplay perspectives. So in the first attack, the boss shoots out little nightmares. These are little dangerous creatures that move pretty fast to the position you were previously at when they spawned. Then the second attack is a pretty cool bullet spread pattern, and last but not least, the 3rd attack is an explosive bullet that follows the player. And again, after some final polishing and balancing, I'm finished with this boss as well. Now I've built 6 bosses in total, so each of the 3 first areas have 2 bosses. When it comes to bosses, I only need to make the final boss, which appears after the 4th area. But actually it's kinda a dream goal for me to not only have 2 bosses for each area of the first 3, but having 3 bosses for all the first 3 areas. But I'll probably first focus on other things instead of bosses the next weeks. But back to the already did stuff. I now have implemented all of the spells that were on my to-do list so far, and that makes 19 spells in total at the moment. And I created some enemies as well. Among them, the Firefish, which has a pretty unique movement pattern, the Hot Dash, which dashes between his patrol points, and the Soul Slash, which does a nice sword slashing move. All these enemies are found in the second area called Fields of Fire. And then for the third area called Forgotten Nebula, I created the Flying Bomb, which explodes if it's too near to the player, the Fat Bat that leaves smaller bats when it dies, and last not but least, the False Spell, which looks similar to a spell which is a special action pickup for the player to remind you. But the False Spell is more reddish and it doesn't have these shiny particles around it. When you get too near to the False Spell, it breaks and a creature that follows the player comes out of the False Spell. And that's it, what I did these past few weeks. Next I will tackle the upgrade shop, and if I get some time I add some more sound effects. Hope you enjoyed this devlog, and if you want to see the future progress on my game Osore, you can subscribe to the channel and hit this little bell to get notified when a future video from me releases. See you next time, cheers!